At first, the element of discovery seems fun, but it's fundamentally flawed and drastically short-lived, which is a shame because it would have been really cool. On the 30th of November, Blizzard dropped the solution to the Cataclysm-hating members of the WoW community, a new vanilla WoW seasonal server, the Season of Discovery, which lasted about 5 days before everything was discovered. But nonetheless, the success of SOD is hard to ignore. Blizzard claim 4.5 million characters have been created. There's hundreds of groups forming in the LFG channel around the clock, and so many people are in Ashenvale that the new PvP event is broken. I have now played the game for over 100 hours, so it's about time I did a diligent review evaluating one very simple question. Is it even that good, or was the season a little overhyped? This is probably the only place you're going to get an honest review, since so many other content creators out there these days give very disingenuous criticisms of Blizzard games in order to strengthen their relationship with the company. I don't give a f about that. In this video we will cover the leveling journey, the new features, which is honestly a strong word, the endgame, and the PvP content. But before we jump in guys, have you ever wondered what it'd be like to explore the edges of civilized space and boldly go where no man has gone before? All Trekkies will want to hear about Star Trek Fleet Command because it's a game extensive enough to really capture the magic and wonder you felt watching those original Star Trek films. Imagine if you could just get a crew of your friends, go exploring space, discovering new cultures, build your very own Starfleet, or go romancing several female aliens and give Kirk a run for his money.
Is this where I hit you?
Well, now you can. As the commander of a starbase, you can recruit iconic officers like James T. Kirk, Spock, William Browker, and even Luther Sloan. Then you can go build powerful ships like the USS Enterprise, a Romulan warbird, and the Klingon Bird of Prey. You can collect, build, and upgrade hundreds of other ships, all from the Star Trek universe.
Engage.
And this month of December, they've released the second phase of content from my favourite Star Trek era, the Next Generation, with missions inspired from the events of Season 2 and 3, and also a new wave defense feature. If you're a fan of Star Trek, or if you're looking for a fun and engaging strategy game, you should definitely check out Star Trek Fleet Command. It is a game that will keep you entertained 4 hours and make you feel like you're actually part of a Star Trek universe. Be sure to use the promo code WARSPEED for a great new player starter pack, and scan the QR code on the screen right now or use the link in the description to download the game. It's available for PC, Android, and obviously iOS. The launch of Season of Discovery, as expected, was total pandemonium. As usual, Blizzard drastically underestimated the volume of players interested in their 19-year-old game, because of all the amazing changes they've made over the past 2 decades to the retail version of World of Warcraft, which have only ever improved the game, obviously. But surprisingly, Blizzard were able to adapt very quickly and adjust the server player capacity in order to better deal with so many players. Me and my friend originally got stuck in a 4-hour queue for the Living Flame server. We decided to give up on that and play the RP server, but when we got to level 10, it appeared that the server queue on Living Flame had just totally gone, and so we were re-rolled. This was a nice surprise because at the time I was getting horrible flashbacks to the original Classic WoW launch being stuck in 8-hour long queues. For this adventure, I decided to roll a female undead warlock, which is probably seen by most as a very weird choice, but for some reason, I really like the animations and the class fantasy of playing the game as a banshee or an old evil witch. This probably says a lot about my childhood, as I did grow up with a mother and 3 aunties all into Wicca and paganism. You can only imagine what it was like to come home from school one day to witness your aunties casting curses on their ex-boyfriends with candles, crystals, and a stick of cinnamon. On our journey, we discovered a great many new occurrences, new NPCs, objects, and mini class quests in order to unlock the new runes. And on day 1 this was very exciting, feeling like you're the first pioneers of a new fantasy land, but the novelty of this fell off pretty quickly when everything was just posted on Wowhead. You see, the human brain isn't designed to not ruin things for itself. It is designed to pick the fastest path of least resistance, especially in gaming. I mean, obviously when you read a book you don't just read the last page to find out what happens, but in the context of making your character more powerful, most players are naturally just going to seek out the most efficient methodology. Actually, that's quite a hard word to pronounce.
Methodology.
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 Methodology, I think I've nailed it. I mean, I wouldn't have a career on YouTube if that wasn't the case. I know there's going to be some righteous melts in my comment section right now saying, well, I didn't look up anything because I didn't want to ruin the game for myself. You're a stupid poo-poo head for going on Wowhead. Look, we were born too late to explore the world, born too early to explore space. Live with it. We have this thing called the internet. At first, the element of discovery seems fun, but it's fundamentally flawed and drastically short-lived, which is a shame because it would have been really cool. Unfortunately, there will always be websites out there like Wowhead to ruin things for everyone. You can only really get this new MMO feel of discovery when you play a new MMO, because then there's so much information that the websites struggle to keep up. And honestly, in this climate of gaming today, you really are reaching, to be honest. Blizzard claimed they wanted to recapture the wonder of vanilla WoW. They wanted players to interact with other players to discover the new runes. But let's be real, this only happened for a day or two. It wasn't long before people just stopped asking questions or just looked up stuff on Wowhead. It was nice while it lasted, but it didn't last long. If Blizzard really wanted to maximise this element of discovery and the sense of wonder, they should have 1. Not shown the game at BlizzCon, 2. Not even told us that there were going to be runes in the game or new quests, 3. Drop the release date a week in advance instead of a month. Oh, and you should have encrypted the data better like they do for the retail clients. Despite the fact that me and my friend got onto the server late, we did actually manage to get ahead of the pack, and by level 10, it was pretty smooth sailing with barely any competition for mobs in the open world. We eventually ditched open world leveling to save some quests for making gold, but also we could farm previous loot while we got to level 25 if we just grinded dungeons. We were also getting about 35k XP per hour, so we really couldn't complain. By the way guys, this video has taken way over 50 hours to make, so I would really appreciate it if you did subscribe to the channel. That does really help out, and if you go to my channel page and hit my subscriber only video, you'll get loads of cool guides for Season of Discovery. Now, the first order of business for me at level 25 was getting the Metamorphosis rune, the only rune that had actually eluded the community for a significant amount of time, but this was actually only because there was a bug, which prevented certain mobs from dropping a important quest item. Before we knew all that, our main theory at the time was that the Paladin quest items in the towers were also part of the Warlock questline, since Warlocks could also pick them up. Luckily, I locked into this theory with a raid of many other fellow Warlocks, and when they fixed the bug, it wasn't too long before I got the rune. This long class questline was one of the most fun things I've ever done in World of Warcraft. Personally, I think this is what WoW should be all about. Open world group content and long quest chains that give huge power spikes. It's what really defined vanilla WoW. And mix in some fun world PvP against alliance teams of paladins in the same area and you're in for a good time. I was actually one of the first people on the server to get the Metamorphosis rune, and I experienced something I'd never experienced in MMO before. Very briefly, I became a server celebrity. I was walking around Orgrimmar and the Zeppelins with hundreds of people around me cheering me on and asking me questions about how I got the rune. This was a truly charmful moment for me, and this is something that couldn't have happened without the new rune system. The rune system is one of the best parts of SOD. It's totally changed the meta, and now we have to discover the meta for the first time rather than just refine the information we already have from private servers. And Blizzard are continuously making class changes, which is always keeping things interesting, because in the original Classic we already knew, let's be honest, like what was going to top the meters from day one. We knew all the hybrid classes were going to be forced to heal, and hunters are good in Molten Core and fall off later on, etc, etc. Now, who knows? The runes have massively improved the class design. I still think there's a little more that can be done, but overall they removed so many irritating limitations of classes and made playstyles way more interesting to play. But unfortunately, this is the only real new thing about the game, apart from BFD and Ashenvale, which we'll talk about later. You see, Blizzard said there were going to be new quests, which gave me the impression that the open world was going to be built upon, but it wasn't. They only meant new class quests. Now, I have to draw a comparison to Total WoW here, the very popular Classic Plus server. In the low 1 to 25 content alone, there are so many more settlements, quest hubs, quest chains, rare mobs, world bosses, not to mention how there's totally new dungeons like the Crescent Grove set inside an open plan Ashenvale styled forest with new quests for all of the dungeons. Oh, and you actually have class changes even bigger than SOD. New professions, survival system, new races, and the list goes on. Now that's what I would call a true Classic Plus server. And don't get me wrong, I'm definitely not a private server shiller, as many of these private servers are massively corrupted with illicit practices, and even Turtle WoW has a shady approach to monetization. So it sort of feels a bit like an anticlimax, to be honest. I wasn't expecting the level of content of Turtle WoW, as that's been in development for a number of years, but I was expecting some new questlines not tied to classes at least. However, although there isn't much new content, because the level cap is 25, it means players get to experience a lot of content they haven't experienced before. The open world of Warcraft Vanilla has a lot of content for players to experience. This is because originally people played MMOs way slowly and more casually. Yeah, I was meant to say slower there, I mean you wouldn't believe I've got a degree in English, would you? So Blizzard designed Vanilla WoW accordingly. Casual players will always be able to find groups of group content, and more hardcore players get to experience multiple classes at ease. The much slower pace of phase releases means people aren't rushing to 60 and leaving others behind. Only 10% of players have actually reached level 25, still 2 weeks after the launch, which proves that there are many casual players still just chilling and enjoying the game at their own pace without feeling the pressure to keep up. I think this is great because it will encourage more people to play SOD. The audience of SOD is definitely dominated by a more casual audience. If I was to create a buyer persona for the Season of Discovery, it would be a 35-year-old man with a 6-year-old child and a baby, or at least one other on the way. In today's economy, they'll probably only rent a house, own a second-hand people carrier bidding with a T or a H, stupid enough to buy a bottle of Regain even though it doesn't work because you can't genetically reprogram yourself with a bottle of shampoo. Dad gamers, whatever you want to call them, Season of Discovery is perfect for them. But honestly, I think the scales are too tipped in one direction. One potential problem with the game is that it's way too casual, which in the long run will deter semi to full hardcore players from playing the game. But then again, if only 10% of players are max level, probably even less of those players are true hardcore players, then maybe it won't be that much of a problem simply by the fact that the audience is so dominated by casual players. And even if they lost the hardcore players, I don't think that'll put much of a dent in the player base, but to be honest, I think with the way things are now, I think even very casual players are eventually going to run out of stuff to do. I think the hardcore classic players are honestly only playing SOD because it's something new to do and they are bored of raiding ICC. But going forward, I don't think SOD is going to satisfy hardcore players anywhere near enough. I mean, will these players go back for Wrath for one last end boss in Ruby Sanctum? I mean, that could already be out, I don't even know. Probably not. But who knows what the future will hold. So I've now done the Endgame raid Black Fathom Deeps multiple times, and to summarise, it is definitely tailored for a more casual raider as there isn't really any level of difficulty apart from Twilight Lord Calrus, but even he can be cheesed with consumes and enough DPS. I imagine some casual players do find this raid somewhat challenging, but it is fundamentally very easy. But this isn't a problem. This isn't a complaint from me. A raid that you can pug twice a week for fun is a great idea. You really don't need to commit yourself to a guild's raid schedule if you don't want to. There's no pressure to join a guild in order to progress in the game, meaning you can just join a guild purely for social purposes. You can actually join a guild you like, rather than just having to put up with a toxic guild just because they are competent and efficient at raiding. Like I said, SOD game design is blissfully perfect for the casual player, which is why it's not exactly to my personal taste. I like challenging raid content. The most fun I've ever had playing Classic has definitely been Naxxramas, Sunwell, Ulduar, hard modes, and ICC. But again, that's fine because I represent a small portion of the player base, and it has encouraged me to seek challenging content in a different area. Because the most fun I've had in this game hasn't been from PvE content, but rather the PvP content, especially organised Warsong Gulch pre-mates. If you follow my channel for a while, my most favourite thing to do in World of Warcraft, back in the day anyway, was rated battlegrounds. Unfortunately, I've not had the chance to experience that since the days of WoD, but pre-made Warsong Gulches are definitely a very close experience. And honestly, I'm starting to think that low-level PvP is just more fun than max-level PvP, and I think the main reason for that is because players don't feel like raid bosses. PvP skirmishes are way more action-packed and fast-paced when low-level because you can die so quickly, but admittedly, one horrible thing about vanilla PvP is how there's no clear casting buff when you res. So for instance, on my Warlock, I need to buff myself and use about a quarter of my mana every time I do a reset and die, and mages have this even worse if they want to fully buff. The Ashenvale PvP event has also had an interesting journey since the launch, in the sense of a journey of chaos, bugs, and total anger. Firstly, most of the time, it's not really a PvP event. It's a world boss event where you quickly run around and kill some bosses while racing against the opposite faction. Actual PvP encounters very rarely happen because of the way the event is designed and because players, well, they just want to get a reward as fast as possible and therefore will actively avoid PvP, which totally defeats the purpose. Oh, and most of the time the bosses just bug out, evade and reset. In fact, I've seen the whole event totally reset a number of times. Blizzard really messed up this event. It's a real shame because it has so much potential. They just seem to always mess up world PvP, especially when you compare it against the great world PvP design from other MMOs. I honestly think it was designed by a chimp and a goldfish, but the chimp turned up late to work every day. It was supposed to be an event similar to the original Hillsbrad world PvP battles. The Horde and the Alliance would push against each other in an all-out war. But the PvP bosses are dotted around the map, so the enemy faction could just camp them until they spawn. It really doesn't make any sense. Why aren't there just 2 big bases at each side of Ashenvale with an end boss, like an open world version of Alterac Valley like it was supposed to be? And why don't you even get rep for PvP kills in the zone to encourage PvP rather than people just camping world bosses for rep and actually just avoiding other players? They really messed up. I think anyone with basic MMO knowledge could design something better in their sleep. I also don't understand why they didn't add more PvP rewards than what they did. For instance, there's a necklace of agility and stamina on it, and that's the only necklace option. What are the casters gonna get? Well, I had to equip it and look stupid with an agility piece because there's no better option. Why isn't there just a low-level PvP set that's just a recolor of a gear set skin already in the game? Although the PvP is fun in the game, I don't really feel like there's much to work towards anymore. I've got all of the PvP rewards, I've done the raid multiple times and got most of the gear. The only thing that's left to do really is level my engineering up a little bit. You can run out of things to do very quickly in SOD, especially if you're a player who naturally just plays the game at a faster pace, unless you're prepared to make multiple alts. But for me personally, since they didn't really add a lot of new content to the open world, it doesn't really have a massive amount of replayability for me. Especially as me and many other players have done vanilla WoW leveling so many times. Yes, you can go and say that I've ruined the game for myself by rushing everything, but honestly I've only played the game just as much as any other World of Warcraft launch. The difference is that, for the Wrath launch for instance, it had an abundance of new content to experience. SOD very simply doesn't have a lot of content. You see, this game is tailored for dad gamers who only have about 5 hours to play the game every week. If you don't fit the bill, you're very likely going to get bored of the game very quickly. I think honestly at 100 hours, I'm definitely at that point. But the truth is, Season of Discovery isn't perfectly designed for the kind of gamer that I am. And that's fine, because I'll probably just barely play the game until the next phase of content is released. And because there's so many floods of new dad gamers coming in, the game will very likely stay very popular for the server's lifetime. It's a casual gamer's dream. But anyway guys, my name is the Meta Goblin, and until my next video, ciao.